Thank you guys for coming out. I was telling somebody in the back, I don't even know if I would come out to see me, so I appreciate it. I know it's time, and I know this part of the semester is busy, so I appreciate that. All right, and did this topic come off as odd to any of you guys? You're like a little bit intrigued. You're like, what's this guy going to talk about? Yeah, okay. All right, and if you'll excuse me, I tend to go pretty off the cuff and pretty casual, so that's just sort of the way that I roll. But I grew up in Southern California, so that's just how we go. All right, and I'm going to turn this way because I do need to see what's going on the slides. You guys okay still? All right. All right, so we are going to talk about the spiritual side of innovation, and right off the bat, my clicker doesn't work. We have to move the. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I thought for context, not certainly to puff myself up, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background because I think you'll see some innovation actually even woven into that. So I do have a kind of a weird background, so I'm going to just give you the quick flyby. I actually started life as a creative person. I'm still a creative person, so I was a design major at UCLA. I worked as a creative director and sort of as a software tech early on in like the graphic software animation industry. That combination of things, actually while I was still doing this, I actually went back and got my MBA. So I was a creative person trying to get an MBA, and most schools rejected me because they said I needed to go back to undergrad and study finance, accounting, all the traditional business things if I wanted a business degree to layer on top of my creative degree. And I said no, but I did find that the Claremont Graduate School, the Drucker Center just down the road, took me as I was. They said, it's fine, we like creative people, we'll let you come in and study business. But the reason I did that was I felt like I was executing other people's ideas, and I wanted to be able to kind of go upstream so my ideas were going to be the ones I could also execute. So that's why I took a creative person, wrapped him in an MBA, focused on marketing. I worked at Disney actually for 24 years. I spent time as a creative supervisor, and then once I was done with my MBA, Disney's a big place, so I was able to move around a bit. So I moved into brand and product marketing and strategic alliances, and I was there for a long time. And then it was time to say goodbye and move on. And but while I was still at Disney, I was also like, well, I was actually editing some friends' dissertations, and I'm like, I would love to teach someday, and there's some other things I want to study. So I found sort of an offbeat international school that would let me sort of design my own curriculum. So I really focused in on social entrepreneurship, but I did some other things as well, and got the doctorate to layer on. I began that while I was at Disney. Jumped into the world of marketing consulting. I worked for some big electronics companies, was a sole proprietor for a while, worked at a number of different agencies. Realized I really didn't like to run my own thing. I wanted to go back and work for a company. So I did some things. I worked in sourcing with Aquent, began teaching here at APU a few years ago. Worked for an online e-learning company called Marie Forleo as the director of customer experience. And then today, I just started a few months ago at Armanino, who is one of the top 20 consulting CPA firms. They're the largest CPA firm based in California. And I went there because I was super happy in my job as a director of customer experience. I'd built a great team over 2 years. I just hired my last person. Everything was going really well. Armanino reached out to me, and I'm like, this is funny. This is like a consulting company and CPA firm. My wife's a CPA. She thought it was really funny, and that I would be working for a CPA firm. But they handed me a blank piece of paper, and they said, we want to now do marketing. We want to consult with companies, help them build their marketing teams. And the blank piece of paper was just too attractive to me, and I took it, and I've been super happy. They've been great. So all that to say, you don't have to stay in one field your entire career. As you'll see, I worked as a creative person. I've worked in marketing. I worked basically in sales as an account director. I've been a professor. I worked in customer experience, and now I'm sort of back into marketing. but I've been able to sort of weave things through. So don't ever feel like you're totally locked in. Feel free to be innovative with your career, because all of these things still trickle down to what I did up front as a design major at UCLA, because I still am a designer at heart, but now I'm like designing the way that people market and designing the way they build a digital core around their marketing and bring in customers and all these kinds of things. It all sort of fits together, but it's a wide world. I had talked to a student just the other day, and he was telling me that, I'm a design major, I'm doing entrepreneurship as well, what should I do? And I said, it's always going to serve you well. Just keep going, because who knows what kind of jobs are going to be in 10 or 20 years. So anyway, that's just a little bit of context from what I'm going to talk about tonight. So the theme is, this gets a little heady, materiality and spirituality are inextricably intertwined. So the theme I want to talk about tonight is that innovation and spirituality, to me, are really very much intertwined. It's an inward working that gets outwardly worked through innovation. So you'll see as we go through, I'm keeping this very top line, very light. We're basically going to go through a lot of innovation is this, innovation is that. And I'll try to keep it, again, pretty top line, but not ramble on too much. So the first one is, innovation is, in my opinion, a spiritual, faith-based experience, letting you see, what presently can't be seen. So if you think about what faith is, faith in God, faith in anything, is that ability to visualize something that isn't there. And that's really what innovation is it's looking at something going, this could be better, this could be different, we can change this, but you're able to visualize that. But that to me is a very spiritual, faith-based experience, because it takes faith to believe that I can actually make that change. So let me move on. I think faith is a uniquely human gift from God. If you go back to Genesis 1:1, that could be rephrased, colloquially as God is a worker, and God is an innovator, and God is a creator. I mean, it starts there at the beginning of the Bible. God is a creator. And so I think when we step into the role as a creator, as an innovator, we're sort of imaging what God does every day of the week. If you just go out and look at the natural world, I mean, it's an incredible space. Whether you start looking at the stars or the planet around us, or even our microbiome and our bacteria inside of us, from the tiniest thing to the hugest thing, God is an incredible designer and incredible innovator. And that gift is something that we have. Innovation is a holy dissatisfaction. This doesn't mean that I'm dissatisfied with God as being holy. This means God, I think, put inside of us the ability to be dissatisfied when things aren't right. And if you look around the world, if you read the news, there are so many things around us that aren't right. But as I'll get into in a moment, I think the choice is, innovation is a choice. Do I want to change these things around me that aren't right, whether it's in my business, or whether it's in my home life, whether it's in how I make my cup of coffee in the morning, or do I just am I going to be okay with the status quo? So to me, it's an internal burning to be able to change things for the better as a holy dissatisfaction. And it's good. It's good to be dissatisfied with how things are if you can make them better. Innovation is a way to increase the meaning and value of life. Everything around us, from the lights to this camera to our screen, all of those things came from innovation. This is a really nice room. I just teach across the hall. I've never even been in this space. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to bring my classes over here. But all of this came from one form or another of innovation, right? And the more we can change those things, create new things, and then give them to others, sell them to others, however we want to communicate that, it allows us to bring, more meaning and more value to each other's lives. Next, innovation is ubiquitous. People think that, only special people are innovators. And my push is to challenge everyone to see that each of you are an innovator. You may not all be inventors. I tend to segment things to inventors are the people who create, the spark, the idea, the flame. The innovators are the people who go, that's a great flame. Let's take it here. Let's put wood around it. Let's set some chairs around it. And they work collectively together to create something new called innovation. And then when you get all of that going and you're creating, cooking your s'mores over the fire, to me that then starts to spread into entrepreneurship. You're making something. So don't feel that you're not an innovator. Everyone, I think, is called to be an innovator. Next up, innovation is internal first and then external. It's an outworking process. It starts, I would say it starts in your head, but to me it really starts sort of in my gut. I see something, I feel something that is wrong, and in my classes I teach my students to, number one, if you're looking for something that you want to do an innovation project on, what bothers you? What bugs you? What do you see that is patently wrong that you'd like to fix? A process, a product, a company, anything. But it really starts inside, then that passion is what will continue you through this process. I told the folks in the back I get worked up on this stuff, but I'm going to start preaching it pretty soon. Innovation is a choice. It's a structural response to substantive change aimed at creating new value. That's a lot of words, but I think there's a lot of meaning there. And the reason I put that trash can there is it's a choice. I was working in Central California for about 5 months and literally commuting back and forth. I'd stay up there during the week, come home on weekends. And where my office was at this agency, I had to walk from a parking garage to the office, and I had to walk down these stairs. There was, a fair amount of large homeless population in that area, and the trash can was always overflowing. So every day I walked past this overflowing trash can, and I just thought, why doesn't somebody do something about this? I'm tired of walking past this. And then one day came, and I started kicking a few, and I have OCD, and I don't like to touch trash at all. So I started kicking some of the trash towards the can just to make it so I had a nice way around it. And then I actually started to pick up or put some of the trash in the can. You know what? After a couple weeks, the area was clean. But it was a choice. I mean, that's not really innovation, that's just cleaning up. But I had a choice. Do I want to improve this? Or do I want to just walk by it and be angry every day? Innovation is a response to change. A response rather than a reaction. We have a lot of problems in the world, whether we look at, inequality issues, we look at racial issues, we look at environmental issues. The photo I have here, yes, it's a little architectural digest-y, but if you look at the issue of, in the environment and rising seas, you've got choices. You can start to put sandbags up, you can build bigger walls, or you can innovate and figure out how do we live, if the seas are rising, how do we live on the water? Now, granted, you might not make a house like that, but the thought is there of trying to respond and not react and plan ahead. Innovation is empathetic. The best innovations you'll ever do and an extra passion for you is when you're not just doing it for yourself to build a business, to get wealthy, but you're honestly trying to serve someone else. If you're serving someone else and empathetically seeking to give them innovation, that is an extra form of passion that will drive you forward. Innovation is connecting with other people and connecting with God. In my course, we were talking through, I literally spent 2 hours taking my students through, what's called the innovation system cycle. And it gets really detailed. It's like 3 big flow charts, but it takes innovation from the initial invention all the way through like the death of that product. But if you look at it, and what I ask them to pay attention to is how many people are truly involved in this process. And there's a lot. Any kind of major innovation has a lot of hands in it. It can't be done by any one person. And it needs people like project managers to follow things up, and people to follow the documentation, and engineers and accountants and everybody else. Innovation is a great means of connection because it gives everybody a mission and everybody a vision to focus on. Innovation is for the common good. So am I anti-patent? No. Am I anti, making money for a business? No. But there are times that I think we need to weigh, is this an innovation for me to build a company around, or would it be better for our community and for our world for me to actually make this open and be able to give some of this away? Let me give you a few examples. I'll start from old and I'll go to new. So this is a Franklin stove. It's designed by Benjamin Franklin. Actually, there's a great PBS documentary out about Benjamin Franklin. This guy created and innovated so many things. But the Franklin stove was created during a time when everybody, obviously, I'm on the East Coast of the US, it's cold. They needed a stove, but stoves were smoky, they were messy, they didn't have a great heat distribution. He designed the Franklin stove, which literally after 20 or 30 years, every home of a certain, value had a Franklin stove. They were everywhere. He designed it and he basically gave the plans away. Next up, and his reasoning was, this is something everybody needs. If everybody needs it, I shouldn't necessarily be profiting from it. Jonas Salk, who created the polio vaccine, ended up giving it away. He didn't patent it at all. It went out. There's some talk that, well, maybe it's because of, they had some problems with the patent. I think that can be, chucked away because he himself said, this is something everybody should have access to. And he gave that code away. And lastly, similarly, open source. One of the reasons our technology in the last 20 years has been able to progress as fast as it has is because of things like open source, where you have developers and coders sharing code back and forth. They may not be sharing everything, but they're sharing key pieces so that people can, for the common good, be able to develop and innovate faster. So again, there's times you want to keep it because it is a business after all, but there's other times I think it should be given away.
Open source.
Innovations building bridges for the world to cross. This is actually a pretty cool bridge. I think it's in Venice, though don't write me down on that one. But think of it this way. We stand over here and we see the problem over there, or the solution is over there, and the problem is this gulf. But all of us collectively have this problem. We want to get over there. Somebody needs to build a bridge so that we can all get across it collectively. So innovation is a great way to build bridges between countries, between people, to gather people together. And it's just a great way not to solve problems, but to bring people collectively together. Innovation's more than an idea, it's value creation. Ideas are wonderful. I love ideas. I sit and create ideas all day long. But if it just stays in your head as an idea, it's basically useless. It's something nice for your brain to toy around with, but it really is sort of useless. You need to put it into action, and you need to turn it into something that has value. So, and that value could be an innovative piece of art, it could be an innovative piece of music, or it could be an innovative piece of code that allows my car to get me home tonight. Next up, innovation is seeing beyond the broken to the possibilities. There's a lot of broken things around us, and I think sometimes if you read the news, we focus on the broken and not on the places that we can restore and the places that we can fix. So this is called, this is one name which I have a hard time pronouncing. I believe the other word is kintsugi. It's a Japanese art form that takes typically pottery, but they'll do it with other things. But it's typically pottery that has been broken, and they work to restore it. But if you'll notice, they don't, when they restore it, when I try to fix things with super glue at home, I try to fix them so that my wife can't see that I broke it, all right? But kintsugi is the process of fixing it, but then almost celebrating the fact that this is something that was broken, that now we're restoring, and oftentimes they'll fill it in, at least the outer layer, in gold, so it's really noticeable. But I think it's a beautiful example of, sometimes we think of innovation as got to be something brand new, and a lot of times it's fixing things that are broken. There's innovation built into that, fixing them that are broken and celebrating that we've took a broken thing and we've brought it whole again. Next, it's understanding and utilizing the phrase, what if? My family when I get bored, I just start asking, what if? And so I had a son playing soccer, and I don't really care for soccer, but he played like years and years of club soccer, school soccer, everything. And all I could see is running down the field this way, running down the field this way. I know I don't understand the strategy, but I would sit there in the stands and go, what if they did this? What if they made the goal bigger? What if they made the goal smaller? What if they used a different ball? What if they used multiple balls? And I would tell these things to my soccer, crazed son, and he drove me nuts. But there's such power in that word, what if? We get tired of little kids asking us that, but just keep asking yourselves that. What if? What if it was this? What if it was that? It doesn't even matter if it's the right thing, but that question, what if, picture we all live in a little box, and that question, what if, literally takes us out of our brain's patterning system and allows us to get out of the box to see other things that we're not used to seeing and other solutions to things around the world. So what if is a really nice way. I sit in meetings at work all the time, and I'm always asking them what if, and people get really tired of it. But otherwise, people tend to, we'll get into this in a minute, but our brains have a patterning system that we easily get stuck in ruts. And there's a purpose for that in our brains. But when you're trying to innovate, when you're trying to create, you got to get out of that box. You got to open up your mind and get into some other areas. And what if is a great trigger for that. Next, innovation is asking what's over there and being willing to look. So yeah, it's a little bit creepy, it's a little bit misty, but who's willing to walk down that path and look around the corner to see, what's over there? I like to watch scary movies, and it's always, you hear a noise in the basement and you see that person reach over and go to the door and start to open the door, and you're like, no, don't do that, don't do that. But I'm telling you, go do that. We don't live in scary movies, but if you hear a sound and you need to go down the door, if you need to go over the horizon to see whatever's there, if you need to visit a company, if you need to visit a school, meet a new person to sort of find out what's around the corner, do it. We live in Southern California where you can literally eat anything created just about around the world, right? So on a Friday night, if you're looking for something to eat, pick a restaurant that has food from some country you're not familiar with. Maybe you're not familiar with the food. All of those things help you to ask this question and to solve these things and to figure some things out. Don't always go back to the same Netflix show to watch, but watch something new. I hate watching things with subtitles, but I force myself to, because it's like, just take some time and read it, because again, it gives you a different perspective and lets you see what if scenarios, or what's around the corner kind of scenarios. All right, it's disruptive, and you need to know that it's disruptive. All innovation is disruptive in some forms. Again, people like the status quo, and it's people like all of you guys in this room that'll allow the world to push beyond the status quo. So if you think back to the 20th century, I know that was 22 years ago, there's the two top innovations of the 20th century. I won't even ask you guys because you're going to get it wrong. Number two, I'll show you first, is the train, a network of trains. Think about it. If you lived in the year 1900 and you wanted to go from New York to Chicago, it was really hard. Or if you needed to move packages from one part of the country to another part, it was next to impossible. The train and the network of trains allowed that to happen, but it was really disruptive. It changed in good ways and bad ways, but people, it opened new areas, into other lands, and it brought people and moved people all around the country, but it was disruptive. But I don't think you guys are guess number one, so I'm just going to show it to you. The number one innovation of the 20th century was the refrigerator. Think about it. In 1900, and for years after that, until people got their refrigerators, think about how you ate if you couldn't refrigerate your food. If it was cold, you could put it outside, you could put it in a storm cellar, you could maybe get an ice block, but think about the radical changes and disruption of just having a refrigerator. Think about, if your electricity goes out, the first thing you think about, well, the first thing is probably the Wi-Fi. Your Wi-Fi's gone. But number two is, oh no, my refrigerator's out. All my food's going to go bad. So again, every disruption, every innovation will cause a certain degree of disruption. But that's okay. Just know that going in. And then my last one here is innovation is dangerous. You know, if you're an innovator, there are people who love the status quo who won't necessarily appreciate your innovation. And I've worked at, again, a lot of different companies, and I've heard this so many times of you just have to be careful how you present it, where you go, but you just have to know there will always be a certain group of people in whatever community you're in who aren't going to like what you're doing. So think about it this way. Here's obviously a path through the woods, and then here's the path that goes on in your minds. So our minds, our brains are programmed to filter things out. All I have to do to prove that to you is think about the next car you would love to have, and every morning for the next couple days, just think about that car for 2 seconds, and you will see that car everywhere. Otherwise, your brain filters it out. Every time I buy a car, I think about this because I'll think, oh, that's a nice car. I would kind of like that. And then suddenly I see those cars. Why does that happen? It happens because your brain, we have so many stimuli around us, our brains automatically filter those things out, and we actually don't see a lot of the things around us. So if you want to become more aware of something in your life, just think about it for a minute every morning, and you will see it. If you are thinking about, I want to go to, get my master's at XYZ school, think about that just for a moment every morning, and then your brain will start to click into that, and you'll read the news and you'll see an article about the school you're thinking about. Otherwise, your brain would have just, zipped right by it. Or what you want to study, or again, that car you're looking for. Our brains work like this. But most people are happy with the status quo. They're not going to be appreciative that you're coming in and taking this nice path and are going to, want to run through the trees. But I'm encouraging you, run through the trees. Run through the trees. Don't stay on the path. See what's over here and over here. Your brain will adapt to that. Other people sometimes might give you some grief over it. But I'm encouraging you and giving you the freedom to run through the trees. That's what we were programmed to do from God. It starts inside, it'll work its way out, and it's a choice to run through the trees. So I'll leave you with a couple quotes. I love the writings of Frederick Buechner. He says, faith is a way of looking at what is seen and understanding it in a brand new sense. Faith is a way of looking at what is there and hoping, trusting, believing against all evidence to the contrary that beneath the surface there is vastly more that we cannot see. So think about it this way. Every day if you start to open your eyes, you'll see things that need innovating. The easiest way to sell a product is find a product that solves somebody's pain point. So if you can innovatively solve a pain point, you've either created a great new business or it could be a great new service to somebody. So find those things that aren't seen, but oftentimes they're in broad daylight. You just didn't see it because you weren't looking for it, because that's the way that our brains work. And lastly, from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space, our power to choose a response. And in our response is growth and freedom. This is all about choice. To me, innovation is about faith and choice. Faith in yourself, faith in God, faith in your gut feeling to be able to see and make a change, and then the choice to actually do it. Because an idea just rambling around in your brain is not going to help anybody. You need to move that into action. So a little bit of background on this. Lanny Vincent's book, Innovation Theology, was really helpful in setting up, and actually not just this, lecture, but my innovation course that I teach. And then I'm not plugging my book, but it is the first book I have out on the market, and it took me about 15 years to get it finished. But Planting Mangoes in the Church is about letting people understand the world of social enterprise, and that you're not limited by business or a nonprofit or a cause. You can do them both, and they work together great, particularly in a church setting. Imagine if everyone in the church took their mango, which is the most popular fruit in the world, and ideally, I created this book to be able to be taught in places like Ethiopia and the Philippines and other places around the world, but to be able to take your own mango, your abilities, and in the business scope, plant those into the church, use the church as an incubator to help developing communities to grow. So if it's interesting to you, that's what it's about, but it really helped me get a lot of these innovation ideas sort of out there. And thank you. So we do have time for Q&A. Anybody questions? I think every time you innovate, you will be challenged. So it's not which time, it's every time. There'll always be an audience that they'll either, and it comes from so many different places, if you're causing someone to change their way of life, people don't always like that. Again, it depends on the setting. If you have a product, even Disney always was faced with this, because they would have an attraction that would be there for 40 years untouched. And if they made one change to it, people were upset. And they're like, no, we improved it. They're like, yes, but I wanted to take my child on the same attraction that I went to as a child. And then we were always like, oh, but we're just trying to make it better. So anytime you make something innovative and you make it, even if it's better, you're still going to get challenged. And it could be a variety of things. Sometimes people will challenge you because they're jealous, because they love your idea. So that's going to happen too. The way I've overcome it is, honestly, I just don't listen a lot. I just, if I'm convinced that this is what God would have me to do, and I really, I can feel it in my gut that this is something that needs to change, then, and I'm kind of hard-headed, so maybe I just don't listen enough. But I tend to just know that there's going to be, and particularly, so you could be at you're at a meeting in an office with 12 people around the table. I guarantee you at least 4 of those are probably going to be anti your idea. So it just forces you, on the good side, to be more buttoned up, to have data to back up what you're saying, I always make sure I know who's going to be in the room. If I have people who like data, I have data in my presentation. If I have lawyers in the room, I've covered off on the legal. I try to know who's around the table first and then get them to agree to move forward. That help? Yeah, I spent 4 years at Disney Consumer Products in the late 90s. So I know I don't look that old, but I really did. But I started off, actually we relaunched the Winnie the Pooh line, which was really a great place to be. So I worked with Winnie the Pooh, I worked with Mickey Mouse, I know this sounds crazy. But I actually spent most of my time there working with all of the Pixar properties. So I used to, on a weekly basis, go back and forth to Oakland. One quick odd story is just because it's my one of few odd Pixar stories. But we were getting products. We would have to take our products up there from all of our licensees to get approved. And so it was literally John Lasseter, the film producers, directors, key creative people around the table. And usually, we'd show them sketches, we'd show them products, we'd show them all these things, and they just needed to sign off on them. So sometimes it was really fast. Other times they'd say, well, change this, do this, whatever. We got to one product, and they were just stumped. They weren't sure what to do. And so John Lasseter picks up our drawings, and he goes, I'll be right back. Let me check on this. And so a couple times he would run and go through this door in the corner, and then he'd come back and go, yeah, it's fine. Or he'd go, no, let me check again. He'd do it, and he'd come back, no, it needs to be changed. And, sorry, my boss is calling me, but it's after hours. Anyway, I'm like, well, John's like the head dude here. What's the gist? And I found out that through that door was Steve Jobs' office. So when John Lasseter would get confused, he'd go and ask Steve. So that was my proximity to Steve Jobs. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, have I ever not went where the Holy Spirit is pulling me to? And that's a tough one. I would say probably on little things all the time. And I think on bigger things, I typically have let them sort of ruminate, and then there just seems to be, I always tell God, God, you know how thick my head is, so, hit me on the head of the board if you need to open my eyes on this. And probably the hardest one was my wife and I had three, so I innovated my family. We had 3 children. I felt like our family was too just stayed normal American, American Christian family. Everything was fine, but it was just too fine. And I just I felt God calling us to something different and something better. And we ended up adopting 5 kids from Ethiopia. So we ended up with 8 kids, same house, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-everything home. And it was over a few years. But that was one that I took some time with that one because it, was an impact. But that was one that, I just felt called to do it. But I literally took 3 months to make the decision and get things moving.
I have a question online from John Diaz. The question is, what experience do you leverage most on a daily basis from your time at Disney?
Oh, I had good times and bad times at Disney, which you'd expect with every company. But I think the thing that I probably treasure the most and I carry through is just the exposure to creativity. Of being able to work with some really, really creative people who weren't, and the creativity I think combined with the quality level and the necessity for things to always be at a quality level, it taught me a lot, even to the point that like when I hire someone now, I have to be all in or I reject that person. And I think that I would use that level for most things in my life. I want it to be really good and really right. Because typically if it's not at the top level, sometimes you just don't have enough budget to get there. But a lot of times it's effort, it's time, that idea is okay. And I just try not to be okay with okay. To say it can be better than okay, and let's take the time and effort to make it better than okay. To me, you need to have, if your employees aren't bought in, that tells me that maybe they're not even bought into your company's vision, unless your product is way off from the vision. But the way that I try to lead is by always starting with the vision and making sure, and this is not a company, but it would be like my small team of 20. They're bought into our vision and they agree where we're going. And then I support them, I empower them, I help them to step into these roles and lead and take a part of that. So I think sometimes employees are reticent with innovation because they haven't been a part of the process. They don't feel it's needed. They feel it's additional, it's not necessary. But I think a big part of it is they haven't been, because my trick is if I have somebody who I know is going to be, sometimes you find that, either an engineer or a finance person or a legal person who's you think is probably not going to be in with you in your innovation. And my first thing to do is to get them to really buy in it up front and away from our meeting, so that by the time we get to the meeting, and they have a role in it. So to me, if somebody doesn't like what you're doing, it typically means they don't have a vested stake in it. So get them involved, get them to understand it, get them to buy in the vision, and then typically they're on board. One reason that I always try to push the passion angle of innovation is innovation can be incredibly frustrating. It can take a lot of perseverance and persistence to push that through. And if you don't sort of feel the need for this in your gut, then you yourself are going to give up, because it's going to be hard. It's like starting a business. You really have to love it and want to do that. So if it comes from a place that it's so meaningful to you, you're going to see this done, then you tend to push through that. And again, it's like Ever's question, it happens every time. You're going to have people against you. Things are going to be hard. Things are going to be slow. you just have to learn to push through it and, and predict it when you can. Know that that's going to happen. Know that some people aren't going to like it. Know that there's going to be roadblocks, and just have that mindset that I know a roadblock. Things are smooth right now. I know a roadblock is going to come up at some point in time. I love, it depends on where you are sort of in that ideation process, but I do things as crazy as, I'll go on Google Images or Bing Images or something, and I try to just give myself as much exposure as I can. So before I took this current job, which was, I'd been out of the marketing field for a couple of years. And so I just dove back into marketing. I said, I need a refresher course. And literally I got most of that refresher course from YouTube. Granted, I had years of marketing experience, but I had a break between companies, actually, and I got COVID at the same time. And so I had, 10 books I was going to read. So I read a lot, and I watch a lot of TED Talks. I watch, and there's things that you can easily filter out of those things, but the more I can feed into my brain, the better I can filter it out and come up with my own ideas. So I was able to come up with a new way that I am teaching our clients how to market, but it's literally Seth Godin uses the word scrapbooking, basically taking this idea from this person, this idea from this person, and then making your own scrapbook, because most ideas aren't always original. It's how you fuse them together and then look at them in different ways. So I get a lot of different people's ideas and then put them together into one collective whole. And if somebody said, where did that thing come from? I can usually tell them. But I'm bold about that to say, hey, some of these are my original ideas and some of them are a scrapbook of a lot of ideas. So honestly, that's a great way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think you have to pick which battles you want to fight. There are so many things, and this is what I tell my classes when they're looking for projects to kind of ideate on, is find the things that, to me it comes back to the Holy Spirit and my gut on what really bothers me. Find what thing around you bothers you the most, and that's where I focus on, because if it bothers you, you'll have that passion to make the change. If it doesn't bother you and you're like, it's interesting, but it's not, because you really do need to have that burning passion to see it all the way through to the end, because it's going to take a long time and it's going to be a lot of hurdles. Does that help?
Yes.
Good. Sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the questions. All right, we ready to cut it off? You guys want to close this out, or how do you want to close this? Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the questions and I appreciate the time.